a lot of stuff going on at the moment around psychological safety. And psychological safety is a really, really key thing in running any business or leading any team anywhere. Creating an environment where people feel that they can share what's going on is critically important. My view is that the number one thing that leaders can do is to start to actually be more vulnerable and be more open and share what's going on in their own world and lead what they want.
Gerry Doyle, thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneurial Engineer podcast. Gerry, you're a CEO of a few companies. You're a dad. You've got 5 kids. You are a mental health advocate. How do you do all that? And what drives you? What's your mission? What gets you up in the morning?
What gets me up in the morning is doing things that are going to make a difference to others. So a lot of the things that I'm involved in and that I do are things where I almost describe it as I feel like I'm called to do something in that space, and that I can make a difference to someone else. I remember distinctly a time in late 2016 where very few people knew about my battles with depression, but one of the ones who did turned around at some point and said, at some point, you're going to find the courage to talk about this and realize that you can help a lot of people when you do. And that's the thing that drives me and gets me up is, I run an engineering business. We employ 240 something people today, I believe the number is.
Wow.
It's about those people. It's about making a difference in their lives. It's about the same with my kids and with my wife. And that's the thing that gets me up in the morning and gets me going.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, how do you seek that calling? Is it something that you can see as a vision? Is it something where you realize this throughout time? How do you get that calling?
I just feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it within me of going, like, this is, there are times when every part of my being is saying, don't do this. But there's this little thing inside that's going, no, you got to do this. You've got to do this next step. And that's what it's about, like being in touch with that and knowing that, and knowing over the years that there have been plenty of times where I'd go, oh, shut up and not do it, and then regretted that.
Yeah, that's right. To make a difference in those people's lives, and make an impact. I mean, that is the ultimate calling. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not about the revenue and the profits and the projects and the this and that. It's about those people that are on that mission with you. So well done. So you started out as an engineer, and now you're CEO. Tell us about when you were a young engineer, and what were there some moment in your life where you sort of said, "Oh, I'm going to be a CEO"? Did it just sort of happen? Tell us about your young engineering days and maybe some of the stories that happened to you along the way.
I describe it, Darren, that along the way I've been pretty lucky. Like I finished university in the year 2000, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dad is a civil engineer, has spent his life in construction projects, and I kind of went, I don't want to do that. I don't want to follow my dad. I want to do something different. But I didn't really know, and I fell into the job at Tonkin. I applied to a whole bunch of different places, and this was the one that came back and they said, yes, we'd like to have you. And I went, okay, cool. And then I remember finished university exams. I was showing my age, standing in a travel agent. I don't know anyone that does that anymore.
Yeah.
About to book a flight to the UK. I don't know if you know from our time together many years ago, running was always a big part of my life. I was
Yep, I remember.
I
It's a
was reasonably
question.
good. And I was standing in a travel agent about to book a flight to go over to Europe and try to get into some of the indoor races that go on overseas. And I got one that I was able to get in, and I'd got no others at that point in time. And I got this phone call going, can you start on Monday? And I hadn't bought the ticket yet. And I went, no, yeah, sure. Okay. And I turned around and I walked out of the travel agent and I didn't go. Along the way, there have been a lot of those moments of going, was about to do something, and just before it happened, something else came up. About 3 years into my journey, the then managing director of Tonkin tapped me on the shoulder one afternoon and said, I know you and your wife have got a newborn, but would you guys consider going to Mount Gambier, which is a small regional town in South Australia, for 3 to 4 months while the guy who runs it goes on a long service leave? And I went home and I talked to Jen and we said yes. And it was just that thing of going, you say yes, the opportunities come, you open the door and you try and walk through it as best you can. So there are lots of those sort of sliding door moments of, well, what would happen if I'd chosen the other door? But I've said yes. And I've walked through the doors as they've opened up and keep going. Did I ever set out to be a CEO? No. I describe it as I bore easily. And you know me, I'm not a typical CEO personality.
Correct.
I'm pretty quiet. I'm pretty shy. I don't like the limelight. I'm really happy to let other people take it. Yeah, I just bore easily and I need to be challenged. So
Tell me, a lot of people, and I mean, maybe this is just a social media thing, talk a lot about saying no, protect your priorities, protect your time, got to say no. And it's funny because I feel like we've had some similar opportunities in our life where we've just gone, yes. Do you feel like saying yes has then avalanched you into more opportunities to say more yes, moreover? Because
yeah,
it's like a culminating thing.
absolutely. Like I get the protecting your priorities and being clear on what is important to you and what is not. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't respect your boundaries of where you have them. But saying yes to an opportunity doesn't mean stepping over your boundaries. It's the thing of going, well, so what are and you come to, how do I manage my mental health? What are the things that are important to my mental health for me to be able to walk through life and do the things that I need to do? There are certain boundaries that I draw that are important to me, but they don't stop me saying yes to an opportunity. They just mean that I have to manage my life in a certain way. And so I think it's a very different thing. The say no culture that goes on can live in the same environment as saying yes to opportunities that you're given. It's about knowing where your boundaries are and what's actually important.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that is it in a nutshell, because it is easy. And a lot of people, I get this, I've got this opportunity in Queensland, should I go? And I'm like, yes. Like, well, you might be single, they might not be married, or they're just renting, then they don't have a house. And you're just thinking, well, go, that could be the unlock. That could be the segue, the something that will take you to the next and next and next opportunity. And I think you're right, that culture, they can coexist. But you're right, having those boundaries and understanding your limitations is paramount.
Mm.
So I know, and I'm biased, and I obviously try and talk about it a lot, that, engineers make the best entrepreneurs, astronauts, premiers, politicians, whatever you write. So tell me, how much do you think that your engineering brain, or at least the formative years of what you had in terms of your engineering experience, how much of that do you feel has paved the way for your current role as a CEO, or two-time CEO, whichever you're going to say? How much of that really embodies part of the way you think And you said, you're quiet, reserved, and you can get bored easily, that inquisitive mind. Tell us a little bit about that and how, maybe for the listeners thinking, I want to be an engineer, I am an engineer, that, hold on, that's not some role for a lawyer or a solicitor or someone else or a doctor or whoever has maybe a different, maybe a financial background.
I think engineering at its core is about solving problems. And what what I do today involves very little mathematics, but is all about solving problems.
Mm,
Um, and so engineering gave me a mindset and a framework under which I go about problem solving. And the reason I got into engineering was that I like to solve problems. So I think part of it is it's a mindset that you need to have to be able to go and study engineering and to work as an engineer. But it also opens up the possibility for you to use that mindset in a whole range of other areas. Do I do engineering calculations or design work or anything like that anymore? No, I don't. Do I still remember some of it? Yes.
Stuck in there, is it?
It's stuck in there. Would I trust myself to go and pull out a set of calcs and actually do it myself? No, 100% no.
Yeah.
But do I use the way you solve problems every day? Yes. I think the other thing that I've seen along the way is one of the things that's built into how you study engineering and then the requirements that our profession has on us is this concept of continuing professional development.
Yeah.
And there are always new things that you can learn. There are always new things that open your mind and your eyes to different ways of doing things. And I think that being inbuilt into how we learn engineering, the code of ethics that exists around engineering, those sorts of things, means that it becomes this lifelong journey of going, I'm problem solving, I'm learning new ways to solve the problems, I'm being able to solve more problems, I keep going.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, very much. Again, it is about solving problems. And I think too, the value is often already there. It's about unlocking that value.
Mm.
You said you rose through the ranks. I think these days there is a lot of, I work, 3 years at this company, 3 years at that company, 4 years at that company. You see a lot of that, particularly in the market, in some of the younger professionals. How can you pitch this to someone? And obviously, you are you, and you've done what you've done. How do you say to someone there is a pathway? And I know it's very much entity or business or company dependent. It's not every company you can do that. How do you say to someone you can rise through the ranks? And maybe here's some of the things that you might want to consider if that's something that you wanted to do.
I think one of the biggest reasons that people move on from jobs is because they don't know what comes next, but they also don't ask what comes next.
Mm, mm.
And so yes, I'm a few weeks away from 24 years at Tonkin, and I
Wow.
started as a graduate, and I run the place today. I never was afraid of walking into my boss's office and saying, what else have you got for me? What's the next challenge you can throw at me? And my predecessor as CEO of Tonkin, we used to joke when I would walk in and he'd say, is this the conversation you're telling me you're bored? Um, because I was really upfront with him about
Yeah.
I need to be stretched. I need to be challenged. I do bore easily. What else have you got? Like I don't care. I don't mind what it is. I'll learn. In actual
Mm,
fact, I want to learn. I
yeah.
don't mind if it's a different sort of engineering. I don't mind if it's a, a business related problem, a people related problem. Like I'm I'm here to learn. I want to learn new things. And so the thing that kept me here was, yep, there were times along the way where I was tempted to leave and go and do something somewhere else. But I always had the open relationship with my boss here that meant I could walk in and say, well, I want a new challenge. What have you got that you can put in front of me? So I think the thing where when I see people move on from roles, and a lot of the time, and I've seen it on LinkedIn a lot recently, of why did you wait to tell me that I could get a pay rise or the next opportunity or all the rest of it until I've resigned? And I go, yep, fair. But why didn't you ask before you resigned?
Yeah.
Because it goes both ways. Yes, I would love to see a situation where you don't have to ask because your managers are coming to you with that, but they
Yeah.
don't know all the time. And I remember there was a time I walked into my predecessor's office and said, I'm starting to get bored. What else have you got for me? And the response was, give me a week or two to think.
Yeah.
It wasn't one where he was sitting there going, oh, I've got this waiting. I wonder what I'm going to do. Oh, here comes
Mm.
Gerry. I'll give it to him.
Yeah.
No, it was give me a week or two to think.
Yeah.
And that's a great response. Like, I have no issue with that. I'd have an issue if after a week or two I come back and you haven't thought. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, like, so for me, it was one I've stayed partially because Tonkin always was able to come up with what was next, but also because I went forward and asked for it. I didn't wait.
Yeah. And
And I
that's,
didn't assume that going somewhere else would give me a better challenge than the one I was able to get here.
yeah, I mean, having that conversation is pivotal. And then also that sage advice of saying, well, hey, what else have you got for me? Giving it some time. Because I used to always say things like, people say, oh, I want a pay rise. I'm like, okay, that's great. Well, show me, write the business case, tell me why. Give me the detail that allows me to make a decision as a manager or a director or whatever it might be. Um, those conversations are the key because without them, no one knows. Manager in the dark, people assume, you don't know. And then, people think the grass is greener when sometimes, and obviously to your case in point, you can do that where you are if you had a
Yeah.
conversation. So we've heard a lot about Tonkin, 240 people, Eastern Seaboard. I mean, maybe just give us a quick take on what are some of the current things that Tonkin's doing, just so we can get a bit of an insight to maybe your daily and whatnot. And please, brag away. This is an open forum, mate.
No, well, that's not really my style. So,
Sure.
Tonkin, we've grown out of South Australia over the last decade. So infrastructure is the space that we play in, working around roads, water, structural engineering, waste management, and then municipal engineering. And so we stay fairly straight in those lanes. The growth of the business over the last decade has been, one, playing on larger projects in South Australia, and two, starting to develop an East Coast business. And really the growth over the next period of time comes from developing those East Coast businesses so that they're stronger and doing what we've been able to do in SA, which is just effectively leveling up and going, okay, we're playing on tier 3 projects today. In 2 years' time, we want to be playing on tier 2 projects. And in 5 years' time, we want to be playing on tier 1 projects. Look, as a business, we're not trying to be one of the multinational consultants. We're not eyeing the top table on $1 billion road project. That's not really something we want to do. We're an organisation that likes solving problems. So the gnarlier the problem, the better.
Yeah.
The more people are turning around and going, this can't be done. No, that's the one we want to have a go at.
We'll have a crack at
We
that.
can do it, but we want to have a crack. So
Yeah, I love it.
So that's kind of the basis of the business. We are a values-driven organisation. So it's very much one of turning around and going, we put 4 values up on the wall. They're trust, care, together, and excellence. And we expect people to live those every day. And that includes me.
I love those. Very important. Now that's awesome. Now I can see on your shirt there, and I'll
Yeah.
probably get it wrong. Maybe you can say it for me. Tell us a little about your other venture, and we'd love to hear a bit more about that, to understand what that is and how that came about.
Sure. So the shirt is Agrisano Fresh. Um, I will just call it the Agrisano project because that's what it is in my head. Back in, I think it was 2015, so 9 years ago, Tonkin was part of a consortium that pitched an idea for what to do with wastewater coming out of one of the large wastewater treatment plants in Adelaide to drive some economic development. And that idea involved treating the water to a high standard so that it could be used for high-tech agriculture or horticulture in this case. The project went forward, there were feasibility studies done, and ultimately the Northern Adelaide Irrigation Scheme was designed and built. It was designed and built in a build it and they will come model, and they didn't come.
Right.
Tonkin and a few others continued to work away in the background of going, well, can we try and get this up? And it was one where I think the board at Tonkin let me just play with it on the basis that it was something that was keeping me from being bored. So if it was something I wanted to spend a few hours on every now and then, they were happy to let me. About 2 years ago, a consortium came together, got some external funding, and what we now call Agrisano was born. So Agrisano is actually being set up as under a fund model so that people can invest in it. We're in the process of building a 2-hectare greenhouse in the Northern Adelaide Plains using technology out of Spain. So in Australia, a lot of the high-tech horticulture comes out of the Netherlands. We felt that there was an alternative that would be cheaper and higher degrees of automation. And so we're going with some Spanish technology that is very heavily automated. We're hoping we're probably 4 or 5 months away from moving from construction into commissioning and then into operation. Initially, we'll be growing leafy green vegetables in the system. And it's quite scary how much we will grow out of 2 hectares. And one of the conversations that I'm now having is how do we sell 2 hectares worth of leafy green vegetables?
Yep.
And believe it or not, I am the world's worst gardener. So I'm learning an awful lot about horticulture. I'm learning an awful lot about sales into retailers and food service and all of these other things that I didn't even know existed 6 months ago, or no, longer than that. A couple of years ago, I didn't even know they all existed. But it's been a bit of fun. Tonkin is part of the seed investors into this project, but it is now a separate entity. And so since November of 2022, so almost exactly 2 years ago, Agrisano has existed in its own right. And for my sins, I get to be the CEO of that too.
Well, I hope it's not going to bore you, but it sounds like you're definitely learning a lot.
I'm learning a lot at this point in time. I've said to the investor team that it's one like if we can go from growing leafy greens to growing strawberries to growing melons, there'll be lots of things for me to keep learning.
Cukes, you need to get on the cuke bandwagon. That's
see, cukes is something that you can grow in the Dutch greenhouses.
Right.
They're easy in the Dutch greenhouses. There are a whole bunch of other stuff that we can grow that is harder to grow in the Dutch greenhouses. So
Yeah, I mean, I've got no idea. Next, I'll be like, "Oh, you just grow mushrooms." Like,
again,
again, dark houses. Yeah.
yeah, they're a bit different. So, but it's been a really interesting journey to learn about it, and to see what comes out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
and there is a third venture that
Oh, please.
that has not been publicly released yet, but hopefully this side of Christmas there'll be a we're going to do something playing in this space, which will be very much around the mental health side of stuff and um, advocating for better conditions in businesses has been something that I feel has been very much put on my heart to do. Um, and so looking to get involved in what we're calling a social good enterprise, to do some more in that space. But more
Yeah,
to come, mate.
and it was definitely and is on the question list. And now that you've mentioned it, the segue into mental health. I've read some of your content, and you mentioned your own personal experiences with mental health. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Where that's come from, what you've been doing, and why your advocacy is so strong.
Yep. Okay. So I'll go back and tell a little bit of my story. Um, I was first diagnosed with depression when I was 16. Um, I was in year 11 at high school, and I was pretty messed up at the time. Um, I was diagnosed with it. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I remember telling the doctor, "You're not allowed to tell my parents. I don't want to know about this." And effectively, probably in this language, telling him to F off.
Right.
Um, I, over the following sort of 4 or 5 years, trundled along pretty close to the bottom of the depression barrel. There was not much left there. When I was about 19 years of age, I got so messed up that I did make an attempt on not living anymore. Um, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm here to tell the tale. Something changed along the way, and I kind of came out of the dark hole, and I found a purpose, and that was at the time I was studying engineering. So I found the purpose in there, and that was okay. And I had a few good years, and then I dipped again. And this became the pattern of going, I'd get a couple of good years, and then I'd get a couple of crap years. And um, around the time I was in my early 30s, I was married, we had 5 children, and I was in a really, really big hole. Um, and I took a chunk of time off work because I just wasn't coping with anything. And it was the first time I seriously got help. And so I kind of described it as I break my life into 3 thirds at this point in time. The first third were the first 16 years before I knew anything. The second third was the period between 16 and 32 where I stuck my head in the sand and went la, 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 la. And then from 32 to now, and I'm not quite 48, but I'm getting close, next year, uh, has been actually turning and going, no, this is something that I live with. This is something that I deal with. And so I've had periods of time where I have been in a psychiatric hospital. I know what that is like. I have had multiple attempts on my life. And I live with it today. I take medication every day. I'm in treatment. I regularly see people to talk to about it, to review the medication that I'm taking, to make sure things are tracking in the right way. And it's a constant battle. And doing what I do and the stress that I choose to live under means that I have this underlying depression that is probably going to be there as long as I keep trying to do all the things that I'm trying to do, and might be there forever. There's no guarantee that it would go. I'd love depression not to be part of my life, but I'm also accepting that it is. And in some ways, I'm grateful for it because it's taught me stuff that I never would have learned if I didn't have to go through it. So that kind of gives you the snapshot of my story. As I said, back in 2016, so about halfway through the cycle of that I've been in for the last 15 years of learning about myself, and facing depression in a more serious manner, I had two people in a short period of time. So one, a very well-known and respected engineer, a guy called Robert Kerr, and the second, a lady who has become my coach since, who was part of a program that I was doing in Singapore. And they both turned around to me and said, at some point, you'll have the courage to tell your story and you'll realize that it will make a difference. And it took me a little while to get there, but I started to find my voice in this space. And I remember at an engineering conference in Sydney, this lady, and I can remember her name and who she is and where she is, but I won't name her because I've never spoken to her about it since. She came up and she asked me a question of going, in talking about depression, does it actually help you? And I very, very quickly told her no.
Wow.
And I told her no because every time I talk about depression, it kind of brings it all up and I feel it all and it's there. And I have to go away and I have to process it and I have to manage it and bring it under control. But I was also wrong in saying no so quickly because yes, it does bring back a lot of the pain and I feel a lot of the things. And I'm sitting here and I've told you my story very quickly and very high level, but I know that that's kind of unlocked the door a little bit for things to happen in there.
36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe.
But the thing that talking about it did was it took me further on this journey of self-discovery. I learned so much more about me because I had to come up with ways of articulating it for other people. But I also found along the way that it did make a difference to other people. Some people would tell me stories 2 years after of, I heard you talk about this, or I read what you wrote on LinkedIn, and it helped me in this way. And that, if it helps one person, that's enough. And that's kind of the thing of going, I'm in a pretty safe place. The board at Tonkin is very well aware of what I live with. The chair at Tonkin is fantastic in that she and I are very open and we talk about where I'm at and what I need at various points in time. Talking about depression, there is no career risk for me. It's now so much part of who I am and what I do that if I leave Tonkin at some point and want to do something else, if you go online and look me up, the first thing you're going to find out is that I talk about depression. So there's no downside risk for me doing that. I have ways of managing what it brings up in me, and I've learnt over the time to be able to bring those under control. And so that's good.
Yeah.
And then there's the side of going, if it does actually help someone, there's a positive. So there's very little downside risk. It's manageable. And there's a big upside. So I'll talk about depression. I'll talk about how I manage it. I'll talk about what it's been like to be me. I'll try and make myself as vulnerable as I can. And it's that for someone who is extremely introverted, shy and quiet, doing it is challenging, but I'll try and make myself as vulnerable as I possibly can in the hope that what I'm doing might help someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Gerry, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important to talk about these things, and I think a lot of people don't talk about them. And you're right, just to have those conversations, openly talk about your experience, gives hope to other people that might not have the courage to talk about it, that at this time can only listen. And as you said, if it just impacts one person who might be depressed or, down or whatever, that in itself is the game changer. To
Yeah.
think that just by being vulnerable and wearing your heart on your sleeve, you could impact on someone's life in such a profound way. That is the thing that should keep driving you to be more open and transparent about your experience. And I think as well, a lot of people don't, I don't think a lot of people, and I think maybe now, sorry, but depression is seen as, oh, that's happened to Joe or that happened to someone, or it's a bit more taboo. No one really talks about it. So to have you openly talk about it and talk about the risk, and I think saying that there's no risk, I think a lot of people don't want to say they have a problem, or they don't want to be perceived in a different way because they feel that there's a risk that if they do, what's going to happen? What might happen to my job? Will people look at me differently? Would I have a change of role or position? So to really, where you are, to be so transparent about that and really say, where you are, there is no risk. You don't need to hide it. That is really important.
But I do understand, because I go through the three thirds. The second third, I'd been diagnosed. I knew I had a problem. I'd attempted suicide,
Oh,
but I wasn't prepared to deal with it. I wasn't
yeah.
prepared to actually own it. I wasn't prepared to really talk about it. I kept it hidden. And I kept it hidden because I saw it as being a big risk. And I saw it as being, people will judge me. They won't give me opportunities. They won't do all of these different things.
Yeah.
And it will be really negative. So I completely understand where someone is in that journey. And I never talked about it until I was the CEO of the company.
Mm.
Like, it's really easy for someone to turn around and go, it's okay for you to talk about it. There's no next step. What do you become after you become the CEO of a company?
Yeah.
So I understand completely that I can sit here and say, for me, there is no risk. But there is no risk because I have a great relationship with the chair of the board. My board fully understands what is going on. The leadership in the business supports what I'm talking about and what I'm doing, and they're behind it as a decision. I've set the framework up so that there is no risk.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there is no risk for everyone else.
That's right.
And that's a really easy thing for me to sit and say there's no risk. I want a world where there is no risk for anyone to talk about.
Yeah, I agree.
We're not there. And I
Yeah.
know we're not there.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing for me, is turning around and going, why did I not talk about it for 16 years after being diagnosed? Because I judged myself. I judged myself as being, depression is this stupid, horrible thing that if you were just bloody decent enough, you wouldn't have. That was me putting it on me.
Yeah.
It wasn't anyone else.
Yeah.
But that view is not isolated to me 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It still exists.
It does.
And that's the thing of going, like, there's a lot of work, and a lot of people like me talk about depression. Most of the people who talk about depression are like me, in positions where oh yeah, the downside risk of you talking about it isn't that great. They're retired sports stars. They're
Yeah.
people on television. These sorts of things. We need to get to a place. Not everyone needs to or should feel that they need to talk publicly about these things, but they do need to be able to talk privately about these things.
Yeah.
And
100%.
they need to be able to do that in a very safe and secure way. And there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment around psychological safety. And psychological safety is a really, really key thing in running any business or leading any team anywhere. Creating an environment where people feel that they can share what's going on is critically important. And that sort of work, and there are a number of really good organisations that are doing great things in businesses trying to help how you build that. But my view is that the number one thing that leaders can do is to start to actually be more vulnerable and be more open and share what's going on in their own world and lead what they want. Now, hopefully for them, and I say hopefully because I genuinely don't want everyone going through this, their world isn't one where there's mental illness for them in there.
Yeah.
But you don't have to share about mental illness. You can share about what you do on the weekend. You can share about your hopes and dreams. You can share about the problem you're having with your child or with your dog, or that your car broke down, or that someone slashed your tires, or all of these other things. You just start sharing your life.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I've actually been really challenged. I talk about depression and I talk about mental illness and I talk about the things that I'm crap at. I don't talk about the things that I'm good at.
Yeah.
I don't actually share parts of my life with people that are the more sunshine and roses side of my life. I share the dark clouds and thunder.
Yeah.
And it's a real challenge for me. One of my friends and I had a conversation in January or February of this year, and he said to me, I don't think anyone in our circle of friends actually knows what you do. And I said, no, they don't. They don't.
Wow.
It's not a hypothesis that you have to make. I can give you 100% factual
100%.
information.
Okay.
They don't. He says, why is that? And I said, well, if you ask my wife, it's because when we meet people, they say, so what do you do? And I respond with, I'm an engineer. Full stop.
Yeah.
Next, can we talk about something else now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jen is my wife. Jen turns around to me afterwards and goes, you're not an engineer anymore. Well, I am. I've got an engineering degree. I still know how to do it. But that's not what you do. Why don't you tell people what you do? Truthfully, I see that as being more of a risk than talking about depression to a room full of people.
Yeah.
I see that as being more of a risk because it's not actually about talking about something that I've developed the story and what I'm comfortable to share. It's actually sharing me.
Yeah.
And that's a really big challenge for me, is to go, well, how do I share me? Because, depression, anxiety, mental illness, that's a part, but there's a whole lot more to the rest of me than that. What I do in my job is a part. My family, that's another part. My hobbies and interests, that's another part. How much of that am I prepared to share? Where am I prepared to put that out? And I remember someone saying to me that they've known for years that I like running and that I don't really talk very much about what I did in running. I said, yep, I don't. I said, why? And, well, it's in the past. Like, I still run today.
Yep.
I was at the track last night doing reps with some mates. It was good fun.
Nice.
But, like, it's not that's not what I've done, and the successes or failures that I've had is not important. What's important is sharing my life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If we want to really make a dent on psychological safety, which will make a dent on people being able to share what's going on with them from a mental health perspective, we need to make a dent on people sharing their lives.
Yeah.
And I think COVID and the work from home that we've had has created a greater barrier. And I'm not saying that flexible work is a bad thing. I don't think it is. I think it's actually a really good thing.
Yeah.
But we've got to come up with ways of overcoming that barrier. How do we share our lives with each other? And as leaders, how do we share our lives so that we are leading how to do it with other people?
Yeah. So, I mean, telling stories is everything. I mean, I've talked about it a lot, but engineers are just really bad at telling stories.
Yep,
You know, it's a stereotype, but unfortunately, it's real.
it's true.
They never talk about, sure, you always hear the horror stories, but that project where they saved someone all that money and time, or where they came up with a design solution that no one else ever thought of. And ultimately there's some person cutting the ribbon at the end and everyone clapping. But, you know, Joe Bloggs, who is, was sitting at the computer many moons ago, who came up with something that was a revolutionary new patent, just never even got any street cred. Um, it is funny because I actually introduced myself as an engineer as well. And people say, "Oh, what do you do?" I say, "Oh, I'm an engineer." And usually now my wife will bump me in the elbow and be like, "Oh, come on, you're more than that." And I'm just like, "Well, whoa, like I'm putting what I want out there, and and it's not like I'm expecting the curiosity and the people." And sometimes people are, "Oh, that's great," but other times, maybe even to your point, people say, "Oh, what type of engineer?" Or "My dad was an engineer," or "Oh, and what are you working on at the moment?" And then I'm like, "Oh, okay, now I can actually go into some detail that wasn't really there in the first place, but now since you've asked, I'm happy to talk about it." And I feel like we need to be more open about that, and not, you talked about psychological safety. I think is very important, but being able to ask questions and share stories, engineering or personal life, you're right. It's a key for leadership, and it's a key to get, I feel, a younger generation better about telling the stories,
Like,
because in working with a lot of people, they don't know their backstory. They don't know their story. You're working with someone who came from overseas, and "Oh, why did you come to Australia? What was happening in Sri Lanka? Why? What did you work on there? Oh, it's just doesn't matter." You're like, "No, this is your story, and every time you get the chance to tell it, you should try and tell it,
yeah,
and craft it so that it suits the audience, but also to take out some of those things that someone else might learn something from about you or about your experience."
yep.
Yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, so much to unpack. But yeah, I'm very proud of you for telling your story. I know it takes a lot of courage. Um, done something similar in my own recent experience, and it is something that I feel, in a way, like you mentioned, you need to, it's almost like, I'll draw a parallel to engineering. And I think engineering in my mind is a lot about competence. You mentioned excellence and competence and CPD, but I don't feel that you can communicate effectively in a way until you have the level of competence to be able to do so. You can't talk technically about whatever it is, some engineering calculation, unless you're competent to do so. And I feel that courage that you talked about, and being able to speak out about your experiences, you had to go through those transitions in your life to get to that confidence and courage level to be able to have that ability to tell your story. So I almost feel like there's some parallels in a way, because engineering in itself, and I'm very glad you said you found engineering and that got you out of a hole, which is, that for me is, engineering, it's the answer for everything, of
Yeah,
course. But
true.
to get that, to go through those motions and to have that confidence and courage, that journey you had to go through to get there, that in itself is the reflection point for where you are.
Yeah.
You mentioned introvert. You've mentioned introvert a few times. I know when we met, and I'll tell everyone there was from memory we had to do a personality test.
Mhm.
I may have been next year on the same table. I can't quite remember, and I'm quite out there. And a lot of people, oh, you don't sound like an engineer, or you're not what I was expecting, because that's just how I am. That's my personality. And you came out and you're very reserved, and you said what you needed to, and then boom, your personality came out as an introvert. Surprise for yourself, I'm sure, maybe not. Uh, Tell me, as that is your, and I'll use the word broadly, a personality trait, how have you been able to leverage that to get to where you are in your career? Because I know a lot of introverted engineers who are, they're quiet, like to do their thing, they're happy, they don't want limelight, they're just happy to do their bit. But how do you speak to them as younger engineers or introverted engineers, if I can use a very high level word?
Mhm.
How do you speak to them about what you experience, and how to have some of those key takeaways so that they might be able to say, "Oh, I can be a CEO if I wanted to," or whatnot.
So the thing with any personality trait is it's your natural style, it's what you're comfortable with, but it doesn't mean it's what you're only able to do. And if you look carefully at the definition of what it means to be introverted or extroverted, it's about where you draw your energy from. So, can I walk into a networking event with a room full of people and go around and chat to people? Yes, I can. How long can I do that for before I am exhausted? About 2 hours. And then I'm
Wow,
done.
you know the number.
I know the number.
Yeah,
I can do it for about 2 hours. At a stretch, I can stay in the room for 3 hours. But at 3 hours, I am leaving because I am no longer any use to anyone, including myself. So I know my limits of how I do things. And if you ever go to a networking event with me, you will see my energy levels dropping the longer we are there.
um,
Walk in and I'm okay. The first 20 minutes, half an hour, I look like I'm buzzing around, chatting to people. It's all good. Then we get towards the hour mark and I'm sort of now I'm starting to tire. An hour and a half in, I'm talking to people I'm comfortable with that I already know. I'm no longer meeting new people. Two
yeah.
hours, I'm done. Can I go now? Is it respectable? Has anyone else left yet? Or now I'm with the people who I'm really, really comfortable with, who I describe more as friends than colleagues.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm hanging on. If there's a table with seats, I'm probably sitting in it.
yes,
So introversion or any other personality trait just means that's what I'm comfortable with, and that's where I tend to go and more natural. But it's not an excuse, and it's not a I can't do anything else. The great thing about being an introvert is that most introverts that I know are actually quite good at observing other people, because
yeah,
sitting back and kind of being more comfortable being a wallflower than a flower that's out in the open, you watch and you see what other people are doing. And you can learn a lot from that if you allow yourself to. And so watching people and watching extroverts who are out there and really good in networking has taught me how to do it. Um,
yeah,
and am I as good as them? No, 100% no. Can I get by? Yep. And that's
yeah,
the thing of going like, I do a job where talking to people, being out there, connecting, being open, they're all part of my jobs. That's not my natural style. My
yeah,
natural style would be to walk in, to sit down, do my own stuff. In the meetings that I've been in, and if you go back to when you and I first met, I probably only spoke when I felt that I needed to.
yeah,
Otherwise, I was happy to sit back and not say anything.
yeah.
It doesn't mean that I can't speak more. It doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to do it. It just means that I pick and choose.
Yeah.
And you go back to what we talked about with the saying yes and saying no. I will say yes to so many events, but there is a point in time where I'll go, no, I can't do that anymore because I will not have the energy to actually be of any use to anyone doing it.
Yeah.
And it's understanding where I'm at as to what I'm then able to do. I had yesterday as an annual leave day, and I had yesterday as an annual leave day because I needed to not talk to people for the day.
Wow.
I just needed to. I have all sorts of dietary issues that mean what I'm able to eat and not eat is quite limited. But I actually love cooking. And I took the day off yesterday to stay at home, not talk to people, and cook a whole lot of different things that are going to make my life easier for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
And it was a great day.
And you feel recharged now because of that?
Yep. Yep.
So recognizing that is probably your secret unlock to
Yeah.
now you've come into today having this conversation and you're ready to go.
Yeah. Whereas if we'd had this conversation yesterday morning, you would have got a lot of 1 and 2 word answers to your questions. Of going, yeah, okay.
So yeah, I mean, that in itself, you recognize that you needed it and you've just gone and done it. And then that's recharged you to come back fighting. I mean,
Yeah. And
that is great.
that's the thing with any personality trait. It can be a strength or a weakness. And it's not an excuse that you can't do something else. It's just what you're more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So for any introverted engineer out there, going to a networking event is going to be scary. It's going to be hard. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And you might build your way up into it. And I remember networking events were a massive hurdle for me to get over the top of. I find them, even today, they are like someone dragging their fingernails down a blackboard to me. So you saying at the beginning you're setting up a networking event, doing things and 70 people, and I'm going, whoa, yeah, nah, not for me. But I can do it.
Do you think though, for some of those introverted engineers, can you suggest that they should push themselves to try something like that? Or do you think it's, like you mentioned before, maybe recognizing those boundaries to know because that's the challenge, right?
Well, it's honestly one for them to decide for themselves. Like
Yes.
it doesn't have to be, I can do it, I can't do it. I built up to it. So I started going to networking events where I would go with someone, and effectively I would be their wingman. In other words, I just stand next to them. That progressed to, I got to the point where I could go to a networking event, but I'd make sure that I knew there were some other people that I knew that were going to be there.
Yeah.
And I'd start with the people I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I might do it so that the first time I went, I was only there for half an hour or 45 minutes. And then I build it up to an hour, and then I can build it up a little bit more. And it was like training for an event. You start with something and you go, okay, how do I enter this? Right. The first time people go out for a run, you probably don't make it 5Ks without stopping.
Yeah.
You probably get to a few hundred meters in and go, I got to walk for a bit. Well, it's the same. It's learning how to do a new skill.
Yeah.
There are people who are naturally comfortable at it and good at it and great, well done you. It's not me. It's not a whole bunch of people. But you can learn how to do it. And it's about setting yourself and going, is this something I want to learn? That's a decision that only you can make.
Yeah. I love that.
But if you want to get into a role like mine, you have to learn how to do it. It's a required skill.
Yes.
I can't do my job and never show up at a networking event.
That would be very hard, I can imagine.
It would be. Trust me, if I could do my job and never show up at a networking event, I would. but I can't.
Yeah. That's so it's such a nice story because it's almost training for an event. Like you said, the 5K run, thinking it like being an athlete, little baby steps, chipping away, short periods of time, standing with someone, having a wingman, having a wingwoman, letting them do the talking, finding someone you can attach yourself with. That is really, really, that's a really nice takeaway because I think, and maybe you mentioned like COVID and working from home and some of those barriers, there are still barriers. There are a lot of people that don't know how to network. They don't know how to talk to people, share their story, ask questions. I see it a lot. People saying, "Oh, I don't know how to find those avenues," and very much a lot of people just online. Personal messaging, LinkedIn messages. Hey, and then and I say, ask me for coffee. Like, ask me for a coffee because you can buy a coffee for me and I'll happily drink that coffee and we can have a really great chat. And I'd love to talk about it. And it's the cost of a coffee. Like you don't have to pay the $300 or $400 for a lunch with a speaker and all the rest of it. It's so easy. And I don't think people realize that if someone just was messaging you and said they had a problem and maybe touched you with a certain, personal point or something with their career or whatever it was, and they did their homework and then said, "Hey, I'd love to shout you a coffee," you'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I could probably make some time for that in the next couple of weeks." But no one considers those things. I don't think people realize that not just to have the baby steps, but you can work up to things like that.
Yeah, you can. You can. And look, it is one. The people I know in engineering in senior positions are all very, very generous with their time.
Yeah.
If you reach out and ask them, most of them will say yes.
Yeah.
I will just caveat to anyone who's listening, if you reach out to me via LinkedIn, you may find you're waiting 3 to 4 months before I respond because I am really crap at it. It is a skill that I have chosen not to learn yet.
Yes. One day. One day.
Maybe.
I'm
I'm
sure.
not
Maybe.
committing. I'm not committing to it either.
Don't rule it out. So in the space that you're in, I'll talk a lot with guests about tech, AI, machine learning, robots. Just wanted to get your take on that and how, and if you see any real movement or changes in industry or any trends that might be impacting you and your business.
Look, I think it's a really exciting space. Um, and I think it will lead to changes in our industry and what we're doing. I'm not seeing them yet. I'm seeing companies that are investigating, that are trying things, that are playing with things. I know we at Tonkin, as recently as last week, signed off on doing a little pilot project with a handful of people playing around with something that we're just seeing, well, what happens if? And I think it's a really interesting space because it will become one of going, well, what is it that a machine does and what is it that a human does? And where
Yes.
is that boundary going to be? And how comfortable are various people going to be with that? And so I think it's one where there'll be a tech challenge and there'll be a human challenge. And so as we go from where we are today, where what I'm seeing is it's getting closer and closer, but we're not quite there yet. But I think the reason we're not quite there yet is not necessarily because the technology isn't there yet. It's because the humans aren't there yet.
I like that. The tech is moving faster than the humans. And I think that's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, we joke around, a robot building a house and, human engineer saying, "Hey, hold on, that's a little bit out of whack." And, the engineering robot turns around and says, "No, it's like that because of this reason." You're like, "Oh, sorry, engineering robot." Like, but yeah, that divide is a real insight because I think we haven't caught up to it yet. I don't know if we ever will.
I think it's going to be the one of going, how how do we get to the place where we're actually able to get benefit out of what it can do consistently?
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
I was talking to someone, I think it was back in July, who's in the banking sector,
Yeah,
and they are much more comfortable getting it to do a whole lot of different things around sort of investment checks and yeah, personal detail information checks and all of those sorts of things than I'm seeing we are in the engineering landscape.
yeah,
Um, so I think it is one where it's going to be about how we train the people to use it, which will be
yeah.
where you'll get the real benefit out of it.
Uh, yeah, I definitely agree. So, Gerry, what's next for you? What's on the horizon? You mentioned and gave us a little tidbit that you've got something else going on in the agricultural space, and that all sounds super interesting. What's the next little challenge for you? What's on the horizon? What are you going to be getting your teeth sunk into?
So within a Tonkin landscape, the next challenge is really to strengthen up those businesses on the East Coast. We have a presence in Southeast Queensland, in New South Wales, and in regional Victoria. Over the next 5 or so years, we want to get to having much stronger presences in all three of those states. And so that's, for me, the challenge around that is really building our teams to be able to do that, building the capability of our leaders so that they can build teams underneath them. Um, and that's a fun challenge. I really enjoy that one. So I'm looking forward to that. Within the agricultural space, the challenge is we're going to go from building a facility to operating it. Um, I've never operated a greenhouse before, and I'm not going to. There will be people doing it, but again, it
Yeah,
will be about how do we actually do that? How do we effectively sell the produce that we're creating? And the way we've set this up relies on us being able to develop further greenhouses. So how do we build business cases that make sense to enable us to go and do more? And then in the mental health space, there's this new venture that hopefully in the next 6 weeks, I'll be able to tell everyone all about and go, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to play out. There are a few agreements that have to get signed before I can do that.
sure.
That will be one where it's very much about how we take that forward. In amongst all of that, there are a couple of things that are really important to me. Like um, I have spent part of this year doing some further study in how to be a coach, not necessarily because I want to take on a whole lot of coaching clients, but because I think it's a really good skill to have and to develop. And as part of what I do in all three of those enterprises, building up people's capability is a big part of what I do.
Yeah,
So having some more skills in that area is really beneficial and useful. And I see it as being one where, for me, I like I typically go overseas to do my further education because it gets me away from Australia and the people and things that I know. Um, and so I have this habit of once every year or two, I head off and go and do something somewhere else for a while.
cool.
There are a couple of others that I'm really keen and looking forward to do to continue to open my eyes and see new things.
Yeah,
I'm also at a stage of life like my eldest son uh, is in the back end of his university degree. My second son has finished school. My third one is learning to drive at the moment. I've gone from young kids to young adults. We've got a
wow,
21st birthday in 21 days.
wow,
So that will be quite an exciting time. And so there are things there. My wife who's spent the last 21 years looking after children, is contemplating returning to doing some study of her own and all of these sorts of things. So there's lots of things going on there's lots of really good opportunities and exciting things out there. And then the final one that keeps me occupied and is always very interesting is you and I met through Engineers Australia. I still do stuff for them.
wow.
mostly in the behind the scenes, very little public face to what I do, and
Yeah.
certainly no networking events.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think over the next couple of years, there's plenty of things that are going to keep me engaged and occupied. And one of the great things about my role is that I kind of get to pick and choose my own adventures.
Yeah.
So there's no one else for me to walk in and say, "Hey, I'm getting bored." The person who I have to have that conversation with is me. Turn around and go, "Well, if you're getting bored, what else can you do? What are the next things that are the challenges inside one of the current businesses, or a new opportunity that you can lend your hand to and be involved in?" And the only downside is making sure I don't overcommit myself and burn myself out.
Yeah. Big time.
Which comes back to your 11 balls. I'm going to try and find a YouTube clip of this guy juggling 11 balls because, yeah, I can't see how that's possible. I can't juggle, which
world
is
record. It's a world record.
yeah, I can't juggle. So it's a skill I do not possess.
I could do 3 balls.
I can,
Yeah, I can do that. Learned when I was a kid. It's really, it is actually inspiring because, everything that you just mentioned there and having this conversation, it gives other people like me, hope, but then also some level of like, you're not crazy. You can do these things. You can prioritize your time. You can have a family and be a CEO. You can have balance in a way across your interests and experiences. Because I think there's this whole like, you got to choose, right? You have to choose. And, a lot of people say, oh, how do you do all this? How do you fit it all in? And everyone's got their own style. Everyone's got their own, and it's not a secret, but they've got their own way to prioritize and manage time. And there's a lot of people who will focus on that. But really for me to go, oh, you can be the CEO, you can have this other venture, you can do something else in mental health, you can have a family, you can focus on your own mental health, your own exercise, you can carve out time for that. I can go overseas once every 2 years and focus on me and do some sort of training. I mean, it's almost like people go, oh, well, you've got it all. And you go, but you have to work hard to have it. You have to be present in the moment and you have to be vulnerable and do those things. So to hear you say all those things, at least for me, goes, oh, Gerry's doing it. So I could do that too. I don't have to have those limits and boundaries or stereotypes across, all of the things in society. I don't have to pick and choose my job over my family. You can have all those things, and particularly, seeing you and how you are and being so passionate about those things, just really it gives me hope and almost validates me being that crazy to think I could do it myself. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Gerry, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've really got so much out of it, and I really hope everyone else does too. The ability to rise through the ranks, to be an engineer, to become a CEO, to have a family of 5, to be able to do the things that you've done, it's truly outstanding. And, congratulations to being where you are and being such an advocate for mental health. Really, I'm super proud of you for doing that. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. So thank you again.
Thank you. It's been good fun.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.